right, here's the big breaking news. India thrash Netherlands in Bengaluru. India win by 160 runs. India now gears up for the semi-finals with New Zealand. It's going to be an interesting finals and semi-finals as India now, without losing even one match right from the start of the game, wins against Netherlands by 160. 160 runs that they've won. In fact, the Indian team, the group stage, has been undefeated so far. 2 wickets each for Bumrah, Siraj, Jadeja, 1 wicket each for Rohit and Virat. Quite an interesting match that was. 410 that India made for Netherlands to really catch up, and that was a Herculean task. It was quite evident right from the start that this would be a hard catch. And now 160 runs India has won with. Let me cut across to Nikhil Naz joining us for more. Nikhil, one step closer to winning the World Cup. India is at an all-time high, winning every match that it has faced right from the start of this World Cup in its home turf. Not too sure what this magic is. Is it the home ground that India is really bouncing off from?
Well, Nabila, it's a combination of a lot of things. But as you said, 9 wins out of 9 games. If I go back to about a month and a half ago, before the World Cup had started, yes, everyone had picked India as one of the favorites. Yes, everyone had picked India to reach the semi-finals. But I don't think even the staunchest Indian supporter had predicted that India would go undefeated to the semi-finals. Now, that's unprecedented. This kind of domination we haven't seen from the Indian teams of the past. You will talk about the 2 Indian teams that won the World Cup in 1983 as well as in 2011. Even they weren't this dominant at the group stage. In recent memories, or in fact, even in the history of ODI World Cup, there are only 2 teams that come even close to this sort of domination at the group stage. And that's the Australian team at the 2003 World Cup, and then the same Australian team at the 2007 World Cup. In fact, the 2007 Australian team went undefeated. So that's probably the closest example that one can look at while comparing this Indian team in the history of World Cup. So as I said, they went in as a strong team, but 9 out of 9, nobody would have expected that. I think the foundations were laid right at the start when India were faced against the most successful team in history of the tournament, against Australia in their opening game. They won that after a game versus Afghanistan, which could have been a tricky opposition, as we've seen in the World Cup. They win that. Then the crunch game versus Pakistan, they win that. And from there on, there was no looking back. And the other thing that you really need to notice, we'll always look at, 9 wins out of 9, but take a look at all India's victories, and it's not even been close. They've all been one-sided victories, barring, to an extent, you could say, one versus New Zealand. Even there, India were head and shoulders ahead of the New Zealand team, but the only team that probably ran them close was New Zealand. Other than that, their 8 victories have been completely one-sided. So this sort of domination is unprecedented in World Cup history, and where they are right now, I don't think Netherlands have the chance today. We spoke during the mid-innings, Nabila, and you said that whether Netherlands has a chance, and that is exactly what we had discussed. There was no chance that this Netherlands team could have chased down that 410 that India had put. In fact, it's a massive win by 160 runs. Just tells you the difference between the two sides. 250 is all that they could muster. And remember, this is a Netherlands team that did not fold up pretty early. They tried to play as many overs as possible. It tells you that while there have been teams that have got a lot of runs, in fact, here at the Chinnaswamy Stadium earlier in the tournament, you had Australia get 360 plus, you had New Zealand get 400 plus, you had Pakistan almost, well on course to be reaching 400. Yet you haven't had this sort of performance where the gap has been that big, and the biggest difference has been the Indian bowling. As I mentioned, there have been batting lineups that are getting a lot of runs, but the kind of domination that we've seen from the Indian bowlers, no other bowling lineup in this tournament comes even close, and I think that's the differentiator. That is what makes this Indian team head and shoulders above every other team that's playing. And now you were talking about the semi-final, India up against New Zealand. Whether it was New Zealand, Australia, England, South Africa, Pakistan, any team that was to face this Indian team, they would start as the underdogs and India would start as the favorites. Such has been their dominance in this tournament.